when we take the thought process, some of the thought process away from our kids of like, well, no, I have to make this pass, or I'm waiting on that specific screen, or I have to wait on that cut to do this. Talent can overcome some of those things, but I think we're really putting them in a box and we're not preparing them to be the most creative self that they can be on the floor.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it.
Today we are joined by the head boys basketball coach at Grace Prep Academy, Josh Duke. Coach Duke has been coaching for 9 years overall, 6 as a head coach. He's already created an amazing culture and program at Grace Prep, which happens to be his high school alma mater. He led the Lions to a 2021-2022 TAPS 4A state championship. That year, his team was ranked number 1 in the state all season long. He's a 2-time district coach of the year, and in 2022 was named TABC 4A TAPS Coach of the Year. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
Coacher.
Coach.
What's up, man?
What's up?
What you doing?
Man, I am good. I am digging that microphone right there. That's awesome.
This is not mine. This is my wife's podcast setup. She has a podcast for the nonprofit that she works for. So I'm getting to steal it today. So that's good.
That's big time. That's awesome. I didn't know she did that.
Yeah, she works with a group that does support groups in public and private high schools for kids. And so one part of what they do is they record a podcast and let all of their facilitators and parents listen to it. And so drop some good nuggets on there. So.
That's awesome. First of all, man, I just want to thank you so much for giving up your time, coming on here, talking hoops with me. Your friendship is one that I've really enjoyed over the years, getting to battle against you at Fourth Christian, but now also at Grace Prep. And just always appreciated how much you love the game, you love coaching. And so thank you so much, man, for coming on.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be on. When you look at the other guests, I'm not sure that I fit in, but I'm gonna do my best. I don't know if you remember this. I think the first time that we met was actually when Faith and Fort Worth Christian, our first game, district game. I think it was 2014. And I didn't know you, you didn't know me. We were kind of standing at half court. I think you introduced yourself and, oh, hey, I'm Josh. Nice to meet you. I knew who you were, obviously. And you were like, man, like, what do you want to do with this? Like, is this kind of what you want to do? I mean, I remember I was thinking about it this morning. I just remember it so vividly. And I was like, yeah, like, I think I want to be a basketball coach. I think I want to, like be a head coach one day. And you were like super nice and supportive and just like, man, like you could do it, this, that, and the other. So like you said, I appreciate your friendship a ton. It's been something where, like you said, we've battled over the years and we've grown from competitors to colleagues and
yeah,
share stuff with each other. And so it's a really good relationship that we have. So I'm thankful for it.
Well, man, I really regret the good advice that I gave you because of the butt kickings that you've given me over the years. So, man, what was I thinking?
On those, but
one thing I've always appreciated about you is I feel like you are a student of the game. And as coaches, that doesn't stop. We ask our players to be students of the game, but we have to continue. So you're constantly like, about players, about coaches, teams, schedules, but I would assume also that you have some coaches and leaders that you like to follow and learn from. So who are some of those guys?
Absolutely. As I was, thinking about that, one of the things that was funny, I was like, oh, it's this coach and it's this leader and it's this, and I thought, okay, I probably need to reevaluate just a second. And the right answer and the real answer is, one of the leaders I follow closely is Jesus. And I try to live that out in my program. Just the statutes that he has set out for living just a productive life. I feel like so much of my job is using basketball as a tool to get, not just the basketball kids at the school, but just kids at the school in general, to see like, oh, wow, like, maybe I've heard that, or maybe I've heard it growing up, but like, Coach Duke or, our football coach or volleyball coach, whoever it is, like, man, they're really living that out. And I can see that in the way I always say this, It's the way we talk to our players.
Nice.
It's the way we talk to officials,
Yeah.
and it's the way that we talk to parents. And I'm not sitting there, sharing Jesus with them every day, maybe in a one-on-one conversation, but I can do that by the way that I do those three things. And so, as I was thinking about that, I thought that's probably what I need to lead off with, and then we can get to maybe some of the less important stuff
Yeah.
later on. But
well, I'll go ahead and jump in after that first one. So first, you're right on the money. Especially being at Christian schools, we have the luxury of getting to be open and honest about our faith, and I'm sure your school's the same way. At our school, it's a mandate that we do share and that we do live it out. You beat Michael Scott in your order of leaders, because I believe in season 1, I think he had God at 3 or 4 on his list, and so you beat.
I learned from that. Yeah, absolutely. Great leader, Michael Scott.
That's right.
There are some nuggets there for sure, but no, I think one of the coaches that I look up to in terms of how they run a program, what they run offensively and defensively, just somebody that I look up to is Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, which will be funny. Obviously, my last name is Duke, but I grew up a Duke fan. It's kind of hard not to be, right?
Sure.
And one of the things that he said that stuck with me is something along the lines of everybody's ideas should be heard, and it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as it's the same mission. I feel like I try to live that out with my assistant coaches. It's so much more than, like that's a great idea, but I make the final call. There's a little bit of that in there. There kind of has to be.
Yeah.
But when we're running practice, when we're in games and I'm turning around and I know like, oh man, like that guy's a really good in-game adjuster. Like, hey, what do we do? What's not working? What do we need to change? I'm not taking that sometimes. Like sometimes I'll take that information and then I'll kind of, okay, I'll listen to it. Then we'll get into huddle at a timeout, quarter break, and then I'll present the information. But probably 75, 80% of the time, I'm like, you're saying that in the next huddle, right? Because it doesn't matter who it comes from. All of the kids respect us. All the kids know what we're, that we sometimes know what we're talking about. But I think that empowers our assistants. And then I think what that does as well is that empowers our players, right? I mean, player-led programs, like that's what we want. And if a kid comes off the floor, shooting a free throw, and I'm yelling at, hey, come over here because I'm about to bless him with some wisdom, and he's like, hey, have we thought about running this, or have we thought about this? And I'm like, oh, actually, that's what I was going to say, or no, but that sounds better than what I was going to say, so let's do that. I feel like when we all share the same mission and the same purpose, it shouldn't matter who says it, and it shouldn't matter really who gets the credit, as long as we're doing kind of what we're doing. So
it's really good, and the self-awareness that you have to be open to what your assistants have to say in their thoughts. I think early on, one of my biggest faults or deficiencies as a coach was I didn't even give them an opportunity. There's a timeout and I just charged into the huddle, and whatever was on my mind, that's just what we did and ran with. And it took a mentor of mine, Dave Bonnell, that was one of my older assistant coaches, that just made a comment of, hey, he asked, do you want me to ever give you input? And I was like, sure I do, coach. He's like, okay, well, it doesn't really seem like that. And like, thankful for him to open my eyes up. And then, but you're right. Like we want investment from our players. We also want investment from our assistant coaches. And one of the best ways is to allow both of those parties to be heard, and not just lip service, but actually take it, think about it. Ultimately, we do have, and we let them know we have the final say in the direction, but really take it to heart.
Yeah. And that was one thing, as an assistant, I got that modeled to me in a really, really good way. And it talks about one of my coaches that I follow and leaders, Jeff Bell. He was only at Fort Worth Christian 1 year. And I was his JV coach and varsity assistant. And we have very different styles of how we play, how we coach. But I really, really respected his style because I knew it was his and I knew it was authentic. And I had to find my footing there for a little while. What does he want? What does he not want? And then one day I just kind of said, like, the worst he can say is no. the worst he can say is in a closed door meeting, like, "Hey, I need you to back off a little bit." And I was like, "I'm going to be open to that criticism if that comes." But the more I kind of found my voice and started showing, him stuff, like in a locker room or in his office, and he was like, "Oh, okay," I kind of felt like, man, I feel like I'm kind of gaining my voice. And then I remember one time on a bus ride, I think we were going to Joshua to play, and he kind of said like, "Hey, I really kind of value what you're saying on the sideline, and I want you to continue to do it, and I'll tell you to stop if I need you to stop." And I said, "Yes, sir, I got you." So that was modeled to me really well. But I also struggled with that my first couple of years as a varsity head coach of maybe thinking that I wanted that, but maybe not making it known to my assistants with words. And sometimes that's what's needed. Not everybody's just going to pick up on who you are and what you like. And the same goes for players. I mean, we have to over communicate what we want from them. And so that was one thing I learned for sure. I think, one thing to hit on too, I went to Grace Prep. I'm very blessed to be back at Grace Prep and be the head coach. And
Yeah, that is cool. Yeah.
it really is. And it's an answer to prayer, but not necessarily something that it wasn't a prayer to get out of the situation I was in. I loved where I was, but just an answer to prayer of something that I really had kind of like on a bucket list, like, man, it'd be really cool if one day I could go back and kind of be a part of the program that shaped me and formed me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And praise the Lord that has happened. But, three guys that are at Grace Prep, two of whom I played for, and one of whom was the coach there before I got the job, Chris Hall, Ray Forsett, and Richie Alfred. There's only been, four head coaches at Grace Prep.
Yeah.
And I'm the fourth. And it's really cool to know that I have a professional relationship with Richie, but then to have also played for Ray and Chris, and just kind of know the tradition and the legacy of what we want to do at Grace Prep and who we have been in the past and who we want to be in the future. I just feel like, I mean, it almost feels like a lot sometimes, of like, man, I'm kind of taking that on. But at the same time, we share this common bond. And I, before we were at the state tournament last year, I called each one of them and just kind of thanked them for the advice they'd given me over the years and the impact that they had on my life, but also to let them know that, like, man, Grace Prep's an open door for you guys. Like, anytime you want to come back and share with my players, I would love that because I know how much they shaped my life.
Man, there's a good nugget there, and something that I've thought of doing at Faith, like at the Colony High School where I went.
Right.
It's easy. Tommy Thomas, Cleve Ryan, like those two guys, and I happen to play for both of them. So like I get that feeling there. At Faith, there are quite a few coaches before me, and I don't know if I've done a good job. So I think the nugget for me is to be more intentional with connecting the past coaches, but also the past players.
Right.
Because even something like our record board, unfortunately, there weren't any records kept before I was here. So it starts with my first year. For a former player, you walk in the gym maybe and you're like, oh, what the crap? Like, we're not even a part of this. Right. Maybe I need to do a better job of digging and finding them. So that's good.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And no, that's a great point. I think the more that we can do, and you do a great job of this. You do your alumni game. I mean, you do engage in a way that is inspiring. But I think the more that we can connect those things, I mean, one of the things that we're trying to get, our guys to ultimately do is to buy into something that's bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And when you can kind of like open the box a little bit and show them like, man, like we had some really good players come through here, or, maybe they're not the guy that's going to be on the record board, but like, man, they were the glue guy on this team. And like, Faith basketball, Grace Prep basketball meant more to this guy than anybody, but you're never going to see his name up on a record board, like that's a great way of engaging, that guy to come back. But also, maybe that player on your team that kind of fits that role now, and they're right on the verge of like, am I buying in? Am I not buying in? That may be something that they're like, oh my gosh, that's really cool. Like I'm going to buy into that role now.
What are your thoughts of this? And something I've been thinking about doing, kind of, because in college, obviously there's a Baylor Athletics Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And sometimes at high school, like I think at the Colony, Darren Williams jersey is retired. They better have a statue of him outside the gym. Like that's kind of how I feel about him. But What are your thoughts on almost doing like Hall of Fame, but where they come back, they get recognized. We have like plaques and things, maybe in a hallway somewhere or in
Right.
the locker room. But the hard thing would be like, what's the criteria for that?
Sure.
Because if
Yep.
it's only the guys that scored a lot, well, while they were here, they were already getting that praise, and we probably talk about them. But what are your thoughts on maybe doing something like that for a high school program?
So we have something similar, kind of to that, and it's something that you kind of have to tend and care to, if that makes sense, because
Yeah,
it's one of those things where if you let one person in, then it's kind of like, well, who's the next one? And then for me as an athletic director, now I'm like, okay, well, it can't just be boys basketball, right? Like it doesn't look real
yeah,
like if the whole Grace Prep Hall of Fame is just boys basketball players.
that's true.
But if you're doing it like as like we call them legendary lions, and right now we have two. It's Isaiah Austin and Emmanuel Mudiay. Uh,
Fair.
Absolutely earned.
When's your legendary lion?
Oh, I think
It's tough.
I have to be
You
there for 30 more years to even be considered. I'm not sure. So,
you've kind of taken yourself out of the running being the athletic director now.
right.
Because
Yeah.
like
Am I going to nominate that's going to be a rough, it's going to be a rough one. Right. That's
guys,
right.
make sure everybody comes. I've nominated myself for legendary lion. That'd be funny.
Yeah, party of one has nominated. So,
It's funny. Terrence, I don't know if you know the name Terrence Thomas. He played at Baylor with me my junior and senior year. And so thankfully he was a part of that group that, we stuck around and survived. But over the years, I mean, I feel he called me a few days ago wondering like, when him and I were getting into the Hall of Fame and when, they don't remember us, they don't do this. I was like, Terrence, like, he actually scored some points and he was a player of the week in Big 12 player of the week one time.
yeah,
But I said, Terrence, like I averaged 4.5 points a game. Like I played hard and I took charges, but like in my opinion, that's not
going to
Hall
be
of Fame
fun.
worthy.
Right.
So I'm not
Mhm.
holding my breath. But
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm with you on that one too. No, but we do that, and we've got we have their numbers retired in our gym, which I think is a pretty cool thing, and that's another thing too of trying to connect the past to now. I think we do a really good job of that. And Grace Prep has been blessed to have some pretty talented athletes in all sports roll through as a lot of schools do, and so we're in the process of kind of adding to that as well. One thing that we actually just did that was pretty cool. We had a volleyball coach that was there for 24 years, from 92 to 2016, when 92 is when the school opened. And we kind of have like a wall of fame, if you will, and we have little gold plaques, and it's really for any family, that I think has like 10 or more years at the school, and they
nice.
put their names up there. And we were able to honor her at a volleyball game, just maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and got her back on campus, and was able to honor her in a really good way. But our volleyball coach now, she actually coached with her during that time and is very
Mm,
connected. And so it was cool to kind of see like that's something that I would put emphasis on with my basketball program, of like
yeah.
really bringing everybody back together, because we don't have that long of a history, 30 years. And the fact that our volleyball coach did that, I thought was really cool. So.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
Your program has had a lot of success in, like you just said, a short time. And it's cool too because it's been different coaches that have come through, all of them. I mean, all four of them really finding a certain level of success, and you just coming off of the season you had. And I
Right.
want to talk about that later on too. But what's one thing that makes your program different?
Man, I think something that maybe not everybody knows, that kind of may know Grace Prep, like in the DFW area, just with basketball. We're a university model school, and we've been that from the start. Our high school and junior high kids go 3 days a week. They go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they have satellite homework Tuesdays and Thursdays. Um, one of the draws we consistently hear from people who want to make the switch to Grace Prep is we get so much family time back, and with athletes, that family time is a lot of the time them and their dad or them and their mom coming up to the gym and,
Yeah.
and getting shots up. And we really like to have a culture of just the gym is open. Like we
Mhm.
want you in here. We want you, working on the things that we as a program feel are important, but also, you getting that individual skill work in as well. And we put a big emphasis on that, and well, I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but that 3 day a week schedule, it really opens up the possibilities for somebody who's like, man, like I'm just a gym rat. Like I want to be in the gym. I want to be in the weight room.
Yeah.
Like that's something that I feel like it's not something where, we looked at it and we were like, man, we want to be this athletic powerhouse. And what gives us the best opportunity was like, that's just how the school was born. We're the first university model school in the country.
Mm.
Uh, but what's been born out of that is, 7 a.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays, kids are in the gym. 2:30 before volleyball practice in the fall, kids are in the gym. We just have kids in the gym, and I think that, um, you know, leaving that time open for our kids and players to come in the gym, find me in the office, find one of our assistants, and be like, man, like what is one thing that you need to see out of me, this week, this month, this season, next game, whatever, we're kind of coming up against. And then not being like, hey, that the rec center's open down the street, or, you kind of need to go outside. I don't really know kind of what to tell you. I'm like, no, like go shoot on our rims.
Yeah.
Like you need to be in our gym on our rims getting reps up. I feel like I've got a pretty good relationship as well with a lot of, AAU programs in DFW, a lot of trainers in DFW that our kids will get together with. And I'm like, get them in the gym, get them in the gym. And as long as it's not being used, we'll find a way to get you in. And I think that's one thing that really, separates us, but also makes the program attractive is that off time to really be able to dedicate to your craft.
Yeah. Two things there. Like, first of all, the relationship with select coaches, trainers, and things, it's just smart.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't care, private school, public school. Like when people hear that, they immediately think recruiting. No, it's relationship building. Your players, our players are going to go out, and we want them to. We want them to go out and get extra work done. Crap, I did that. Like when I was at Naaman Forest, I used to discourage my players from doing anything outside of our, like, guys, listen, I've got you. This is all you need.
Right.
And I felt this friction. There was this competition with select ball trainers and things. And it just was like this moment of, first, why am I doing that? One, I don't own them. They're not mine.
Yeah.
But also, like, I used to do that. Me and my dad would travel all over DFW for skilled trainers, pick one up, put them down, and try another one, get one we like, work with them quite a bit. So that's smart. And the same with the select coaches. Our players have 2 seasons now. They have their school ball season and select ball season. And to try to act like one is more important than the other, ultimately the kids get put in the middle, which is what we don't want. And then the second thing I love about that model is, I would imagine, especially in season, I always just feel like we're so rushed because after school practice, we don't want to be in the gym forever. But after it, like, they need to get home. They need to do their schoolwork. They can't just stay up there all night with us. But I love the university model of finish classes early in the morning, and then you've got this afternoon time to just be around the guys. And I think that's really special.
Yeah. And, I think going back to the relationship with AAU select coaches, this past season, I had a couple kids playing in a certain select program. And I think that their coach, he literally may have been at every one of our games, every one of them. And I was making sure he'd get in. We have a great relationship. We went on visits together. One of our players was, he took
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And I went and he went, and we just have a phenomenal relationship. I mean, he was sitting above and he was absolutely respectful of our program. There was no, like, hey, have you thought about this? Or you can use this kid this way. And I know that, maybe sometimes doesn't always happen on both ends. High school coaches giving unsolicited advice to AAU coaches and vice versa. But I remember there was a couple games, especially at the state tournament, he'd sit 3 or 4 rows kind of up, kind of away from everybody. And all he was doing was cheering on our team. Like, that was it. But he was watching the kids that he had invested time in, like, play on a great stage. Like, it was a really beautiful thing to see. And so it's been modeled to me very, very well, which is a blessing for sure.
Yeah, and we can't throw all of them, into that bad mix because of the one or two. Like, we all have the stories of, you have this JV kid, his select coach comes sitting by his parents up in the stands, and when the kid's not playing, you see the kid looking up and the guy goes like this. Like, those are the bad moments, but those really aren't the norm. The norm is a majority of them are invested in the person, and they do want to see them. I love the idea of partnering with them with visits and things like that, because to think that we're the only show in town is just so false.
Yeah. I tell my kids all the time, players and parents, when they're, sometimes they'll ask, what do you think about this program? What do you think about this? Who should we play with? I had a kid move in. It's a crazy story. We had a kid move in from Chicago, Illinois. Whole family moving to DFW, wanted a different, pace, change of scenery, different pace of life, all of those kind of things. They chose DFW. They find Grace Prep. I get an Instagram DM from this kid. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, I was at the dinner table, right? And I'm like, what in the world? Well, they end up moving, right? And it's in the middle of his junior year. Such a good player for us this year. Last summer, he was asking me, hey, we're not from here. We have no idea. Can you give me some ideas of who to play with? I gave him 3 or 4 names and contacts that I knew that I thought, man, it'd be beneficial for him to play for these programs and teams. I know they're legit, all these things. And I remember maybe halfway through our season last year, his dad came up to me and said, we found this program and it's been such a blessing. And I was like, man, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. And what I challenged, parents and players with is, I'm like, get outside your comfort zone, right? Like, whatever role you're playing on our team, it's only gonna, and this is a little bit selfish on my end, but I'm like, it's only gonna help you as a player to maybe not do the same thing for 12 months, right? Like, if you're our leading scorer, you're really not gonna grow if you go to another team and you're like, well, I just kind of get volume shots up. That's kind of what I do. Like, why don't you go to a team that challenges you? Maybe you're the 6th or 7th man on that team, and now you get to sit in a totally different role than what you play for me, and maybe your eyes get open. And the same thing happens for maybe my 6th, 7th, 8th kid. Maybe they need to go find a team where they're like, man, like, the pressure is on me now. Like, the ball is moving through my hands. I get to dictate kind of what happens, because then they get to play a different role. And then when we all come back together, we should have a better understanding of roles and why people are chosen and in those certain roles. It's played off a lot for us, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, and it's organic. With injuries, it could change by the week. What role you're playing on a team. So, but I think it's an interesting way of looking at that. Is like, maybe get outside your comfort zone a little bit and go find a role that's not the one that you have on your school team, or vice versa, not on your AAU team.
You've had the opportunity to play for several coaches and at a high level, but then also coach for, and you talked about Coach Bell, competing against him that one year at Fort Worth Christian. The style of play that he did bring in, it's very different from what I know you to like or teach. So with all those experiences, what is your favorite style of basketball to teach?
My favorite style offensively has got to be a dribble drive, and really emphasizing pace and space. I don't think I know, watching your teams run dribble drive, watching your teams just have the flow and the freedom to express themselves, was something where I was like, man, I need to find a way to kind of make that my own, if that makes sense. I think when we take thought process, some of the thought process away from our kids of like, well, no, I have to make this pass, or I'm waiting on that specific screen, or I have to wait on that cut to do this. You know, talent can overcome some of those things, but I think we're really putting them in a box and we're not preparing them to be the most creative self that they can be on the floor. And one thing going from Fort Worth Christian to Grace Prep was getting out of my comfort zone a little bit as a coach and kind of letting pace and space, and then letting our kids be themselves and watching them do what they do, and then go, okay, how can I kind of put some, not some reins on it, but how do I kind of make this my own, and how do I put some rules to this, that way there's a thought process behind it, and we're not just like, we're just kind of fast breaking kind of you watched us play the last 2 years, there's a lot of fast break, but when we're in the half court, I don't want it to be, all right, well, now we're in the half court, bring the ball up. All right, we're in flex. Here we go. And it's, methodical, and we're going to take 45 seconds or a minute. I'm like, man, we need space, and we need the ball handler to be creative. And I think one thing that we did the last 2 years, you talked about Jeff Bell, he ran that circle motion. And it was, it was really, really good for the kids that we had. It put them in a system where they felt confident.
Yeah.
And it put them in a system where they were like, we're not really used to success or really having like a purpose when we go out there. And that gave them that purpose, right? Well, I make the move. I'm a head coach, and we start kind of running that same system, but it's not really mine. And I, kind of wrestle with it. One thing that we did last year is we actually ran a little bit of circle motion, but we moved it to 5 out. A 5 out circle motion. And honestly, I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that we actually scored using the concept of circle motion. All it was pace and space.
Yeah.
All we want is our kids to move. And then looking at in a dribble drive, right? Looking at how the defense closes out, looking at how the defense is helping, looking at how the defense is recovering. Are they recovering high side, low side? What angles do I attack? All of those things were ingrained in our kids. And so all it was this false motion just to get us moving. And as soon as the ball hit a kid, which was honestly all 5 of our kids on the floor really at any given time, had the license to dribble, drive, kick, make a layup. I mean, it really was. I mean, it was at the rim and open threes in that dribble, drive, pace, and space. And so I really like teaching getting out fast. We always want to dictate what the defense does, right? A good defense is going to dictate what you do, and it doesn't matter what you run. We want to get down there and create mismatches so fast the defense is on their heels, and they're like, well, I had to close out late, and then we put the paint touch, and we got an open three and kicked it out. So, we run a couple of different, sets and motions, but a lot of them are honestly false motions. They are just to get our kids moving, getting them in our 5 spots that we really like, and then trying to get as many paint touches as possible and letting our players dictate what happens after that.
Yeah, against bad defenses, you don't need much ball movement or player movement if you have good spacing.
Right.
Because the gaps are there that you can attack. But against good defenses, good coaches, good teams, false motion, like you said, but ball movement, player movement, to get the right player in the right gap and an opportunity to attack. That's really smart. I want to celebrate you, Justin. Again, getting to see you as an assistant coach, take over that Fort Worth Christian program, and then now what you've done at Grace Prep. It has been a lot of fun to even listen to you and text back and forth with you about how your teams are looking, the way that you want them to play, the way that you've embraced the 3 ball. Because I think so many of us are we want, like you said, we want to play in race and space, but as a coach, actually allowing it to happen, it's way harder than I think like many coaches believe.
I think so too. And it's one of those things that's a process. I can remember, kind of early on, especially my first year at Grace Prep, we didn't have a ton of seniors. We were mostly junior heavy, and a lot of them, some of them had played varsity as a sophomore, some were on the JV. They weren't connected like they were in junior high, so it was kind of that year of getting the band back together, if you will, and we learned how to play with each other. and the first, month and a half, on top of it being the height of COVID, it was one of those things where it was like, just keep trusting it. Just keep trusting it. We've got the players. They know the system, but we have to keep trusting it. Even when we were shooting, 25, 28, 29% for a game. And it's like, okay, do we really need to be looking at getting more, looks at the rim? But then I just kind of was like, man, like, I don't know why we would say we're going to cut off one whole aspect of our offense to emphasize another. I'm like, you got to empower your players to do that, right? I mean, like, of course, you're gonna, come over and be like, hey, was that, you had a wide open layup? Why are we kicking the three? Like, that's a very normal conversation,
Yeah.
even in space offense. Like, I'll just take it 2 points, thank you. Like, why are we making it any harder? But at the same time, I'm like, I want my players to come over and be like, I should have just taken the layup. Like, why would I, like, they have to have ownership of that kind of stuff. And so that first year was a lot of getting to learn of like, okay, that's a good shot. That's maybe what we want in this situation. Maybe this is what we want in another situation. And then I felt like this year it was much more of like them going out and being like, in a respectful way, like, coach, we got you. Like, we know, because of the over communication, we communicated this is what we want offensively, and on top of that, they had played so long together. It's like, and that's the dude we want to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody was like, "You're right, that is the dude we want to do it." So yeah, and I know you don't talk a whole lot of defense on this podcast, but
a little waste of time. No,
waste of time.
No, I do like some good pressure, and I like defenses that will also lead to running and gunning. So yeah,
siding the ball, all ball pressure, shooting gaps. I mean, we generated so much, as anybody does. You just generate so much offense when you're the defense is dictating what the offense can do, not just on your heels going, we'll just keep helping, we'll just keep helping, we'll just keep helping. And then hopefully they miss a shot. I'm like, I want to force a missed shot or force a turnover, not just hope for one.
Yeah. I think what's really special is when you see athletes like you had, but that also had skill, but were also organized, which comes from coaching, then you get something really special. Coming off of the year that you had and the success you've had really the last 2 years,
yeah.
Younger group this season,
yeah.
how are you helping them? Like not necessarily just replicate what you've done before, because new teams that maybe they find things out differently, or
right.
even have ultimately some different choices that you have to make for them. But how are you helping them with maybe expectations of what they just seen?
Yeah, one of the things I think in our first day, like the first day of school, we don't go out on the floor. We're in the locker room, kind of. I'm passing out our expectations. We introduce everybody, all of those kind of housekeeping things. And one of the things that I wanted to let them know was that this is a different group, and that's okay. And also, us as coaches, the comparison game is a thief of joy. I mean, you just can't. And I committed to them. I said, look, I'm gonna in this talk, I'm gonna talk about some of the things that I think our guys did the last 2 years that made them very successful as individual players, but then also allowed for us to have some pretty good team success. And I'm going to talk about that and maybe some by name. And I said, after this meeting, if I ever do that again, if I ever say like, God, just last year's team wouldn't have done this, or that, you need to hold me accountable. Like I need to hear it, because that's not fair for you, and it's not fair for me. I'm not coaching the same group, and you guys aren't the same group, and we have strengths that we have this year that we didn't have last year, but we also have weaknesses this year that we didn't have last year. It's a totally new group, and so I wanted them to hear that from me, that like I was never going to sit there and be like, oh well, we only won by 10 tonight. Last year we would have won by. You can't do that. That is totally defeating to a team that's like, well, they're kind of gone. Like, I don't know, like it doesn't matter anymore. And so I think that's I think it's hard, because as humans, we want to do that. It's kind of like you look on Max Preps and you're like, oh, we beat them by this, and they lost it. You can't do that. Correct?
Dangerous game.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game. You can't do it. And so, I'm sure it's going to be a work in progress. And I'm sure that some of those things too, of what I'm saying. Of like, I don't want to compare them. They also can't compare themselves. And that's something that I can't necessarily control inside of their mind, but I can create a culture where we don't do that.
Yeah, I think that takes a lot of control because
Yeah.
when you, especially for as a coach, when you're thinking back to how smooth something was last season, all the success you had, I think it's dangerous to continue over and over again to bring up the past, to set unrealistic expectations for your current team. Chris
Right.
Hill at Jesuit had a good point that every year he starts fresh, obviously taking some of the good things, but
Absolutely.
starts fresh with the group that he has and helping them to become what, to reach their potential. But then at the same time, too, the standards that you've set, what your program is about, or the culture of it, that can carry over from year to year.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we have a sign. We just have one sign in our locker room. It's right above the door, and it just says the GP Grace Prep, the GP way. And what we had talked about last year was it doesn't matter who we play, it doesn't matter what day it is, it doesn't matter what month it is. We're going to play our way. The opponent should never change based on who we're playing. And then we also would talk about practices. Like, we're going to practice the GP way, right? And a couple of those things that we had put in there, and something that I really wanted to make sure that our guys understood, because the word I'm about to say it can be used in a negative connotation. So I didn't just say it and say, figure it out for yourself. We kind of put some rules around, like, what do I mean by this? And one of them was pride. And it wasn't a foolish pride. It wasn't a pride in oneself. It wasn't a pride and we're just going to roll the ball out and kind of do whatever we want. But it was something where I was like, man, Grace Prep means so much to me,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm proud of it. And when we go on the floor, we should act proud of our program and what we do on a daily basis to set us up for success. The other two words on there were communication and trust. Those three, I mean, it boils down to those things. And every program can highlight different things and they're all good. But I just kind of had settled on that, is like, that's the Grace Prep way right there. And it was so pointed. And assistants would bring that up in practice, like, are we practicing the Grace Prep way? And kids, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was something where it was common language. And that, like you said, that doesn't change. The players change, the style could change, the opponents can change, all those things can change. But the program and what we're about, it doesn't matter if it's Johnny or Jimmy or whoever it is running out there. We're going to play the Grace Prep way.
Yeah. I think it'd be really cool for when you have your former players come back. Obviously, maybe some style is different depending on the team that you have.
Right.
And maybe some concepts that you have this group running. But for a former player to look and maybe we ask them, does it still look the same? Does it still feel the same?
Yep.
Are we, and what we mean by that is the way that we are on the bench, how we are as teammates, the way that we communicate, the joy that we play with. Or, what if they come back and they say, you know what, just look just a little too serious. Like, you guys are taking yourselves too seriously. I think that would be a really cool, I don't know, marker to find out for yourself and your program of, have we deviated culture wise far from what we've been in the past?
Really good.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. Coach, how many kids do you have now?
In
your kids, your family. Yes.
Yeah, kids, players, you know how that can go. I have two. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
So I can't imagine. I can't imagine being a head coach. I didn't really have to do this. Being a head coach, young myself, but then also having young kids.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance that with the demands of an athletic director and then also as a head coach?
I think it's hard. Like there's no magic answer of like you do this and it's great,
Yeah.
there's no problems, smooth sailing. And I think a lie that us as coaches hear is that everybody has it figured out but me. Like he looks so happy. He does this. He has a family. He's, whatever, but he's always at games, and I'm sure his wife is so supportive. Sometimes that's not the case, right? And I think that's something that the enemy uses against.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Good call.
That, oh man, everybody's got it figured out but me, and something's wrong with me. And so don't listen to that. First off, I think it looks different for everybody. Every family is different. Every family dynamic is different. Every, things in my family that are okay and work for us may not work for you and your family. So kind of as I talk about some of the things that have been really great for us, if that doesn't work for you, that's okay.
Yep.
The first thing that I have to talk about is my wife, Carly. She is unbelievably supportive in what I do. We both work with teenagers, and so she kind of understands the time and demand that can take. But one of the things that I wanted to do very early on was let my wife into the program. She wasn't going to be somebody that I didn't talk about, not because I didn't like her, but just like, like I'm separating family and work and weird and, whatever. Like I wanted all my players to, like, if, walking in the gym, hey, Carly, hey, hey, Mrs. Duke, how are you? I want that to be a part of our program because I think the things that we try to emphasize in our program run right along with that of like, hey, it's a family environment. Like if I see your parents in the gym or your sister in the gym or whatever, I'm going to say hi because I know who they are, so, these people, my wife and kids are very important to me. So you should know who they are too and be able to have conversations with them. One of the things that she did the first year that I got the job at Grace Prep, she was like, I want to bake for every district win. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. I like to eat sweets too. It was great, and as the wins racked up, she was like, okay, maybe I'll go to once a week, like, maybe, but, our players would be like, when is she cookies? What is she making? And then it went to, okay, well, she loves to see a dunk. Who doesn't love to see a dunk in a game? It's great, right? Okay, well, the first person to dunk gets to choose what I make.
Oh man,
cookies or whatever. And that relationship right there was really cool because my players would then like see her in the stands and be like, what are you making for us? What do you make? After the game, and you just see that relationship, and that's a part of letting her into the program. And I feel like for her, when she knows my players, she can put faces to names. And when I'm scouting, when I'm at practice late, when I'm maybe staying after to talk to a kid, whatever the situation is, she can put a face to the name with who I'm interacting with. And then it doesn't go from he's choosing the program over me or he's choosing, it's like, man, he could really be blessing that kid. And I'm sure I spend too much time, we all do. We spend too much time at the gym. I'm not perfect at this, but I felt like when I've come home and been able to say like, I was with X player and this is what we were talking about. She was like, well, I'm really glad that you had that time to do that. And it just kind of heads off any like, well, I was 30 minutes late for dinner and you kind of had told me we were going to eat dinner at this time, So I think that just the family atmosphere is something that we drove home really hard. And I think that's paid off for us really, really well. And then I think too with kids, my son that's 5, we had a Grace Prep jersey made for him, and he was all excited about it. We asked him what number he wanted on there. I think he was 4 years old at the time that we did this. And he said, oh, I want 4. And we were like, oh, like, cause you're 4 years old, whatever. And he goes, no, that's my favorite player. And it was a kid named Josh. And I was like, oh, and he knew him by name. And that was his favorite player. So we have this picture. I think it was after the first game of our season last year. And Josh and Sawyer, my son, are standing right next to each other, both holding up 4s in their 4 jersey. And it was like a moment of like, that is 95% of what I do. Like that's why I do what I do right there. That moment, that picture, letting my family into it, my players embracing them like their family. I don't think my kids will ever regret growing up coaches' kids if that's the type of interactions that they have.
Well said, man. I had the chance of talking with a lot of coaches about this topic because you're right, it is hard. And Mike Neighbors and Jamin Copeland,
Yeah.
different coaches, different levels, different ages, but both similar. And you basically said the same thing. This idea of balance. Good luck.
Right.
Good luck. Because, and so Mike Neighbors said, stop trying. Stop trying to balance it. Bring them together. Bring them together. Right. I love the idea of your wife really being invested in those players and those relationships. And I don't know if you've had conversations like this, but by bringing Jana in, she watches the games differently. Like some guys say, like, don't bring the game home with you. Leave it at the gym.
Sure.
I can't do that. I can't do that. And here's the thing, like, I love getting to talk with my wife about our team. I love there have been times that because she grew up a coach's daughter, and her dad was a football coach for 30 plus years, and she's seen it, she's been around it, but there's times where she would give me really good feedback on body language, on things that she saw on players that stood out, and there's been times where I come in the next day and I let my guys know, like, guys, my wife saw this and she's right. Like, it's just bringing it all together. But now keeping, like, let's just say it's a hard loss. And if you are the kind of coach that takes those really hard,
right,
is resulting hardcore after, don't take that home. Like, don't make your home miserable because of that. But the idea that you can truly separate the two, I don't know. That just seems hard.
It's super hard. And I think, us having kind of a routine for when I get home from games, it is also really good. Like I'm a processor. I'm not, and I'm an internal processor. And so, if you catch me at the wrong time, my answer could be way different and emotional.
Yeah.
And then if you give me some time to flesh that out, I've probably already had the conversation in my head, and so, very early on when we didn't have kids, it was a lot easier, obviously, but we'd go to breakfast the next morning. And so we wouldn't, like Friday night game, get home, we wouldn't talk about the game or kind of what happened, especially, if it was kind of something where I was bummed out about kind of what happened. We'd kind of have some space, but the next morning we'd go to breakfast and we'd be able to talk. And so I think it's finding rhythms like that just enable you to be the best spouse and the best person in general is probably good. And then I think the other thing that is crucial for us is my wife knows that basketball season is busy and tough and it's demanding. Like those are things that will never change. It doesn't matter if we're good, if we're not good. It's busy and it's demanding. And she gives me so much grace with that of how I handle it. But then on the other end, prioritizing off nights.
Yeah.
Putting the ball back in my court, right? Like we talked about a lot about what she does, right? Well, something that we can do is protecting those off nights, and focusing on her, maybe going on a date, focusing on our family. Those are things that I think kind of give me more grace from her perspective that like, okay, he's very busy. He's doing these things. He's scouting. He's at practice. He's watching film. He's coaching, managing personalities. But then on that one chance that he did have to give our family some time, he did do that.
Yeah.
I think that kind of is an action step for us as coaches. And I feel like halfway through the year, I get kindly reminded of that every year. You're right. Well, it's my fault,
on to that point, one of the things that thankfully my wife's only had to say it a few times over the last 10 years, especially, is I feel like I'm second right now.
Yeah.
And like, that's just a feeling, man. Like, I don't want her to ever feel that basketball, this job, my players are in some ways more important and more of a priority.
Sure.
And so, like, I think a good goal for me for as long as I do this is never to hear that again from her.
But
And
also,
but if it does, okay, I hear you. You're
what a
right.
great thing to model to our players, though,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
It is letting them in on as much as is appropriate, letting them in on some of that stuff, because at the end of the day, we know that like basketball is also not going to be always be 1A,
Yep.
and if we're expecting that from them and not giving them any grace, but then the second that maybe our spouse says something challenging to us in that regard and we get defensive, you're like, hold on, I feel like this is a learning in a teachable moment for everybody involved in that.
Well, last question, and excited that you chose this one because I usually get to ask this to guys that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years
Right?
and are looking back over their careers at the end. But yours is still relatively, I mean, depending on how long you want to go, but it's
Sure.
still at near the beginning or not even halfway yet. But what are some things you would do differently if you could start over in coaching?
Gosh, I feel like um, you've seen kind of the last 2 3 years a different style of how I coach and our what our kids run and do all of those things. I think I'd be a little bit more bold in embracing that a little bit earlier. Um, Not just doing things the way they had been done because it's a safe thing to do, and not at all in a disrespectful way at all, but just being like, man, if this is my program, if this is what I want to do, I can't just do something that somebody else did because it worked for them. I got to
Right.
find something, and I know that sometimes takes time to do that. Thankfully, I was afforded that time to be able to totally find my footing. I think my practices would look totally different. I remember first 2 3 years. I mean, everything is just down to the second, and it's drill after drill after drill, and 90% of them, if someone did them in a game, it'd either be like a travel or a violation, and we're like, what? This is teaching them toughness, and it's like, well, that is a good quality. I totally agree. I'd love to always have tough teams. You win with tough teams. But maybe not that drill. Like
Yeah.
maybe the drill that doesn't translate at all is probably the one that let's leave that one and find a better one. We had no player development.
Mhm.
I was in, coming out of college knowing, okay, in the early in the fall, late in the spring, there's 45-minute individual sessions, and that's when you're getting better. And when the GA comes and opens the gym, that's when you go get shots up, and it's not in practice, and you're wasting my time if you want me to do things you should be doing on your own.
Yeah.
Like that was so ingrained in me, right? Because it's just the way it had always been. Um, and then when you shoot, you know, 25% from three for a year, you go, maybe we should shoot more. Maybe that should be an emphasis on something we should do. So it was there was no creativity. It
Mhm.
was just we're going to do the same drills 3 days a week for 3 months.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do. And you get sick of it as a coach. I can't imagine how much faster the players got sick of it. I didn't do a whole lot of remembrance there from my time as a player, right? But I think practices would be so much more creative. We start our practices right now with 20 minutes of player development. Every practice is 20 minutes of player development. And one of my assistants, Derek Rowland, does an unbelievable job at kind of meshing the player development ideas with our team concepts of what we're teaching in a team offense.
Nice.
And that's how we start the day. We have music going. We got some Trip Lees. We've got all of the great Christian rap artists are going. And
Don't knock Christian rap. It's great.
oh, come on. But we're trying to that's almost a preparation now. Where I thought it was dumb 9 years ago. Like, well, you just need to stay after and do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I would change, man. I don't think I'd change a whole lot about my interact. I'm sure I would change some things, but the way I interact with players, like I feel like there's definitely ways I can get better, but I feel like being a little bit younger, being able to relate to them, I feel like that's been one positive that I've been able to kind of carry over from each season. But I think growing as a coach of how to structure a program. And unfortunately, I don't think you can do that in year one or two. You have to grow into it. So
Yeah, there's some really good points there. One, just to celebrate you, I since I've known you, I've always felt like you're really naturally gifted with relationships with your players. And it's been a struggle of mine where I've felt over the years maybe of trying to keep that distance of I'm coach, your player, don't want there to be any type of what am I trying to say?
just blurring of the lines.
Yeah, blurring. I want them to there
Like
to be a healthy
yeah.
respect and standard between, but maybe in the process pushed guys too far away. So you've always been great with that. You've had a unique experience where you took over programs that were good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of first-time coaches take over programs that they've been at the bottom, they've been struggling. So anything that you do, if you have any type of organization, energy to what you're doing, it's going to be good. Like you're going to automatically. So you've had some challenges there. And then also the third thing is you're right on the money, practice planning. When I look back in Google Drives over some of the things I did 5 or 6 years ago, I would take 3/4 of it out. One of my assistant coaches, Herb Evans, years ago, I handed him a practice plan about 4 pages long. And I said, man, what do you think of that? Like, I thought it was really great. And he's like, man, this is a varsity team, right? I was like, yeah. It's like, they should know like most of this stuff. But you know what? It was things that I thought, this is what all great coaches do. This is what all great practice plans look like. And the truth is less is more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll second you on that. I think, the my practice times, like it was 2.5 hours every time, whatever. It has to be that. We're not getting better if we're not in the gym that long. And I feel like the longer that I've done it, every group's different. But there are some groups where I'm like, I look down at the clock, it's an hour 15, hour 20, and I'm like, I'm not just going to let them leave. Like, we're probably going to do more player development, but like, we've accomplished what we want to accomplish. And I feel like the only thing that we're going to do is diminishing returns now. And so I'm like, we're done. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
We've done exactly what I wanted to do today. I think we've gotten better. You guys look more confident with what we're doing, and now we're going to spend more time in player development because I think that you can never do enough of that. So that's what we're going to get into.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Ballogy. Manage and measure your players' skill development and increase accountability year-round utilizing the Ballogy app. Boost inter-squad competition with drills backed by the National High School Basketball Coaches Association, including a 40-shot Ballogy skills assessment. Please visit ballogy.com/teams for information on how you can provide this resource for your team. Coach, the speed round, I know you, and so many players and coaches in DFW know you well, but after this,
Man,
I mean, our relationship is going to be even stronger.
next level.
All right. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Bluebell vanilla. Plain vanilla.
Solid.
Classic.
Yeah. Get some peach cobbler in there and you're good to go. How many hours of sleep do you need and do you get?
I would say I get about 6 to 7, and that's about what I need.
Nice.
Yeah.
Best basketball movie of all time?
Oh man, best basketball movie. I mean, Space Jam for me is a big one. The original came out.
Yeah, man, I tried to watch Space Jam 2. I didn't really understand what LeBron's looks meant.
No.
Like, he was just staring sometimes. I'm like,
They made a lot of money though.
What are you communicating there? Anyway, but Jordan was solid in that. Yeah.
So that or Glory Road. I love Glory Road.
Yeah, great story for sure.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the fact that you just didn't throw out Hoosiers because I'm a basketball coach. That's what I should do. I appreciate that.
I will say we had my wife turned 30 last year, and we had a 90s party, and we dressed up as White Men Can't Jump. So that was a good one.
That's a good one. Above the Rim is up there for me.
Oh, that's a good one too.
You got Tupac in it. For high school, Shot Clock or No Shot Clock?
Shot Clock.
texting or talking?
Depends on the person and situation.
Good answer. Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
In basketball, who is the GOAT?
Jordan.
You paused.
I did. I
I did.
this is I've got a buddy. We talk hoops all the time. This is a conversation that we have. But I am on record. It's Michael Jordan.
But who are you feeling? Like who do you think is even in the conversation?
Just to me, probably when I grew up, all of those things. Let's just put it this way: if I had to pick one guy to win one game, it's Jordan. One guy to win one game. LeBron's career longevity. There's the amount of success that he's had over the period of time, and not just teams. I mean, the dude had 30 or 31 last year? Like a 38, 39-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, I mean, it's unbelievable. Now, I will say 2011, I was not a big LeBron guy.
I mean, but you know, in an almost spotless career, especially off the floor, what a great ambassador for the game. Does amazing things for any community that he's a part of. Yeah, the decision was a mistake. Airing that whole thing, come on. But he's to me easy to root for, and amazing what he does on the floor at his size and everything. Favorite city in the US besides the one you live in?
Great question. Favorite city in the U.S. I would have to say Crested Butte, Colorado.
Wow. Okay.
We vacation there. My family does a lot, and it's just like we get to go fishing, play golf.
That's the place.
Weather, unbelievable.
You got mountain views and everything. Yeah.
And there's not hustle, but I mean DFW is traffic. It's just it's a change of pace. You know, I didn't feel like New York City would be the right answer there. It's just going from one metropolitan city to the other, you know. So
yeah,
my answer.
If you could travel back in time, what period would you visit?
Ooh, great question. I taught history for 5 years, U.S. and world. I love history. Time, you know, I'm not sure I'd want to live there.
Visit.
Good. Visit. Okay. World War II, man.
Yeah.
Just the greatest generation. Having a common goal, and just it felt like, you know, there's obviously things during that time period that are problematic. So not trying to say everything that was going on then
sure.
We would want it now, but just kind of the union that everybody felt like everybody was doing things to help our guys over there, you know, and being a history nerd, history buff, love teaching on World War II. I think it's a really cool, you know, tragic but cool time in our history.
Yeah, that's good, man. 2 more. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
1.
Good for you. This is well, I started with this, and now I'm on this. So, how many is that? 4?
For the listeners, I'll say it looks like 2.
Thanks, man. Last one: Godfather, Star Wars, or neither?
Oh, Star Wars, easy.
I knew it. I felt the force, Coach. This is it's really fun. I enjoy every talk that I have with coaches. I feel like I learned something from every episode. Doesn't matter who they are, but there's something about having a relationship with the person that just, I don't know. For me, it's like little light bulb moments throughout, where from watching you, talking with you over the years, I get to have more of those connect moments. And so this has been such a pleasure for me, and I just really appreciate you.
I appreciate you asking me, and I've learned so much from what you've been doing with your podcast. I mean, having the guys that you've had on, it almost feels like a cheat code, you know, like I get in my car, I'm driving somewhere, I see you've uploaded a new one, and I'm like, you know, I don't know where else. I just get to sit there and I'm like, I know I'm going to learn something every time I listen. I'm going to learn something. And so you've done a great job of that. So I appreciate you having me
I'll
on.
pay you for that
Oh,
little
yeah.
compliment later. Yeah, thanks. No, but hey, best of luck, man, with everything. And thank you for your friendship and thank you for talking hoops with us.
Yeah, same to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi Podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.